Welcome to Bookish Mind Season 2. In today's episode, we break down Chapter 11 of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, titled The Mystery of Sex Transmutation. Hill makes a bold claim. The energy that drives physical attraction can be the same energy that fuels creativity, genius, and great wealth when wisely redirected. And we are diving deep into that specific, really intriguing claim today. We're tackling Chapter 11 of Napoleon Hill's classic, Think and Grow Rich. And it presents this, well, powerful and maybe surprising idea, wouldn't you say, about how one of our most basic human drives, this energy tied to physical attraction, sex desire, how it can potentially be, channeled, transformed even to achieve amazing things, success, wealth.
Absolutely right. And our mission here, just focusing completely on what's presented in this chapter, is to really try and unpack what Napoleon Hill actually means by this phrase he uses, sex transmutation. It sounds, well, maybe a bit mysterious.
A little bit, yeah.
But Hill uses it to suggest there's a direct link between this specific kind of energy and, well, developing genius and ultimately accumulating great wealth. That's the connection he's making.
Okay, so let's tackle that key word right away, transmutation. Like you said, it sounds a bit mystical. I mean, alchemy comes to mind, right? Trying to turn lead into gold or something. What's Hill getting at here?
Yeah, it does have that kind of vibe, doesn't it? But according to the source, Hill defines it pretty simply, actually. He just describes it as changing or transferring one form of energy into another. So in this context, sex transmutation means the mind deliberately switching its focus.
Switching focus, how?
Shifting away from thoughts that are purely about, the physical expression of sex desire towards thoughts of a completely different kind.
Okay. So taking that really intense energy, the drive, the desire, and consciously pointing it somewhere else, redirecting it.
Precisely. That's the core idea. Hill argues that this powerful emotion, which, we often just link to the physical, he says, it actually has three really significant constructive potentials.
Three. Okay, what are they?
Well, first, the obvious one, perpetuating mankind. Makes sense. Second, he claims it helps maintain health. He calls it a therapeutic agency that's unequaled.
Interesting. Health. Okay. And the third?
And the third, which is really the focus of this chapter, is its power to transform mediocrity into genius. And specifically through this process, this transmutation. And he doesn't just say it's powerful, he makes a very, very strong case right at the start. He claims sex desire is actually the most powerful of all human desires, period.
Wow. The most powerful.
That's what he says. He argues it's this specific desire that really drives people to develop key qualities. Things like imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, creative ability, things they might not otherwise show, The source says it's so incredibly strong that people will literally risk their reputation, their freedom, sometimes even their life to satisfy.
Okay, that is a bold statement to lead with. So if the energy is that intense, Hill's argument is if you can somehow manage it, control it, you can channel that same power into, say, creative work or building a business.
Yeah. Exactly right. When this potent energy is, and this is his phrasing, harnessed and redirected along other lines, it keeps all those powerful attributes going. That sharp imagination, the courage, the persistence, the creative spark, all of it.
Right.
And then, according to Hill, you can use that as a massive creative force. Doesn't matter the field, literature, art, industry, or specifically accumulating riches.
But it's not automatic, is it? The source is pretty clear. It takes willpower.
Oh, absolutely. He really emphasizes that. Willpower and persistence are crucial. It's not passive.
Yeah.
But he also argues the payoff, the reward for making that effort is huge. Totally worth it.
Okay.
He uses this analogy, comparing it to damming a river. That water's energy has to go somewhere.
Right, it'll find a way out.
Exactly. If you don't channel it productively, like for generating power or irrigation, it's going to find, as he puts it, a less worthy outlet, maybe cause a flood. So similarly, if the sex energy isn't transmuted into creative effort, it'll find other outlets, maybe less constructive ones.
So following that river analogy, deliberately channeling this energy into something creative or productive, that's what Hill says lifts someone to the status of a genius. That feels like a huge leap, connecting a biological drive so directly to like high-level creativity and achievement.
It is a strong claim, but Hill presents it as something based on, well, what he calls research. He says his analysis, looking at highly successful people, showed they were consistently highly sexed individuals who had figured out this transmutation thing, either consciously or maybe just instinctively.
What kind of research?
He mentions it spanned over 2,000 years, looking at biographies, historical accounts, and finding this recurring pattern. highly developed sex natures linked with major accomplishments.
The source even calls sex emotion an irresistible force, something that can't be stopped once it's going.
Right.
And it links it directly to creative ability, even using the effect of castration on animals as supposed proof.
Right, that's mentioned as an illustration of the energy source being removed. And this whole idea about the power of this energy leads him straight into how he thinks the mind works and what really defines a genius in his framework. See, Hill talks about these 10 mind stimuli, things that key up the mind, as he says, get it vibrating at a higher rate.
Vibrating.
Yeah, think of it like reaching states of intense enthusiasm or really active creative imagination, strong desire. And on his list of these 10 stimuli, right at the very top, the most intense, the most powerful of all of them is the desire for sex expression.
Okay, so sex desire is positioned as the #1 fuel for the mind, according to Hill. But fuel for what exactly? What's it stimulating?
It stimulates the mind to operate at that high rate of vibration we mentioned. And he directly connects that to what he calls the sixth sense.
The sixth sense? Like intuition?
Sort of, but he defines it specifically here as the faculty of creative imagination. He claims this faculty is the only direct link between our finite human minds and what he terms infinite intelligence.
Infinite intelligence. So like a universal source of knowledge or ideas.
That's the idea. He says things like intuition, sudden insights, those hunches, big discoveries. They all come through this channel, through the creative imagination.
So under this model, genius isn't just about being book smart or having lots of facts memorized. It's more about accessing this higher level of thinking, this creative faculty.
Yes, that's exactly the perspective in the source. It says this creative imagination works best, becomes most receptive when the mind is vibrating really, really fast, lifted, as he puts it, far above the horizon of ordinary thought.
Like climbing a mountain to see further.
Kinda, yeah. Or his analogy of ascending in an airplane. From up high, you see past the immediate obstacles. He thinks operating on this higher mental plane gives the creative faculty freedom. It becomes open to ideas you just wouldn't get during normal, everyday thinking.
And he suggests this faculty gets stronger with use, like a muscle.
Exactly. It becomes more alert, more receptive the more you rely on it. He even mentions that our conscience speaks through it and points to how artists, writers, musicians, great speakers, they often talk about an inner voice or getting hunches. That's them using this faculty, according to Hill.
He gives some specific examples too, right?
Yeah, like the great orator who closes his eyes, not to shut people out, but apparently to tap into ideas coming from within. Or the successful financier doing the same before a big decision, trying to draw upon a source of superior intelligence.
That story about Dr. Elmer R. Gates is really something. Sitting in his special, dark, soundproof room, focusing intensely on a problem. Then ideas just flash into his mind.
Right, and he claimed these ideas were totally new, not in any existing data. The source literally says he made a living sitting for ideas for big companies. It's presented as a very deliberate process of using this creative faculty.
And Hill contrasts that with the crank inventor.
Yeah, he makes a distinction. The genius, he says, uses both reasoning based on experience, what he calls the synthetic faculty, and this creative faculty. The crank, according to Hill, tends to just endlessly rearrange existing knowledge using only the synthetic part without tapping into that creative flash.
So the process is stimulate the mind, focus on what you know, picture what you don't know, and then wait for the insight.
Essentially, yes. Stimulate, concentrate, visualize, be receptive. He even mentions Edison trying, 10,000 combinations for the light bulb filament before apparently tuning in creatively for the answer. It wasn't just random trial and error in Hill's view.
Okay, shifting slightly. The chapter then brings in another really powerful emotion, love. It makes some pretty big claims here, too, like linking Lincoln's greatness to meeting Anne Rutledge.
Yes, suggesting the stimulation of love he felt then was key. And similarly with Napoleon Bonaparte tying his success to Josephine and his decline to putting her aside.
So is the argument that the influence of women, specifically through stimulating this desire and maybe love, is behind many great male achievements?
That's a central argument in this part of the chapter, yes. Hill claims that the achievements of many great leaders can be traced directly back to women who aroused their creative faculties, often through, as he puts it, the stimulation of sex desire.
So the desire to please a woman, that's presented as the primary motivator for men.
He makes an incredibly strong claim here. I mean, really direct. He says, man's greatest motivating force is his desire to please woman. Full stop.
Wow.
Yeah. He asserts that men accumulate fortunes, seek power, build things, mainly to satisfy their desire to please women. That's his stated view in the text.
And following that logic, the source says this gives women immense power. The power to make or break a man.
That's the phrase used, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests a woman who understands this dynamic, understands male nature as Hill sees it, and tactfully guides it. She has huge influence. He paints this picture of men being giants in the world, but easily managed by the women of their choice.
And then that really absolute statement, no man is happy or complete without the modifying influence of the right woman. All caps in the original, I believe.
It is, yes. Very emphatic. He warns that ignoring this, in his view, means depriving oneself of a massive force for success. And this loops back to transmutation and an interesting observation Hill reports from his research. Analyzing thousands of successful people, he noticed something.
What was that?
That outstanding success rarely happened before age 40. Often much later, 50 plus. And his conclusion, based on his study, was that younger men tend to, well, dissipate their energies through overindulgence in physical expression of the emotion of sex.
The sowing his wild oats idea again.
Exactly, that phrase is used. He claims most men just don't discover or really learn to use the other possibilities of this energy, the transmutation part, until later, after potentially wasting many years when the energy is actually strongest.
So the peak productive years, 40 to 60 maybe, are when transmutation starts happening more, even accidentally sometimes.
That's his suggestion. Maybe the purely physical drive lessens slightly, or the desire for companionship, influence, legacy grows stronger. He even suggests nature kind of helps, tending to harmonize love and sex between 30 and 40, allowing them to work together as stimuli.
That brings up another key distinction he makes, doesn't it? Between sex energy alone and sex energy mixed with love.
Absolute crucial distinction in the chapter. Sex energy alone, he says, is this incredibly powerful urge, yes, but potentially uncontrollable. It can lead to actions that are disorganized, distorted, and totally destructive. He even mentions things like theft or worse.
But when love gets mixed in,
Then, according to Hill, the actions guided by that combined force become balanced. They have sanity, balance, and reason. Love provides the tempering influence.
that seems like a really vital difference in outcome. He even claims, I think, that love is what truly reforms criminals, a change of heart driven by love, not just sex influence alone.
Yes, he makes that point, that the combination of love, romance, and sex is the ideal blend. That's what can lift someone to genius while providing balance. He cautions that a genius, driven only by sex energy, without love's influence, might be ruthless or destructive, lacking conscience. So the path to genius, or maybe just reaching your highest potential according to Hill, it's not just about being smart. It's fundamentally about the development, control, and use of sex, love, and romance.
Developing, controlling, and using them. Okay.
It's about actively encouraging those positive emotions, making them dominant in your mind, while pushing out the destructive ones. And because the mind is a creature of habit, as he says, this takes consistent effort, willpower, persistence. Transmutation is that active process of changing those thought patterns.
And it needs voluntary self-effort, another emphatic point.
Exactly. It's not passive. And he adds a practical point, too. Someone who gets rich purely on sex energy, without love's balance, might lack the character to actually keep or enjoy the wealth. Love brings wisdom, balance.
He even talks about physical signs, doesn't he? How these emotions supposedly leave unmistakable marks on your face or demeanor.
He does, suggesting you can sort of see the difference between someone driven just by raw drive versus someone whose energy is softened or refined by love. Love, he says, softens, modifies, and beautifies the expression.
And he sees love as spiritual, something that lasts even if the person is gone.
Yes, leaving indelible marks. He suggests memories of love can be a lasting source of inspiration. He pushes back against the idea of love lost, arguing true love never really leaves and every experience is beneficial unless you let it make you bitter or cynical.
So the ultimate combination, the peak state for genius, is love and sex blended with romance added on top.
That's the pinnacle, according to the chapter. When those three combine love, sex, romance, he claims, the obstructions between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence are removed, then a genius has been born. That powerful mix unlocks the highest creative potential. But despite outlining this potential, Hill really laments the general ignorance on the whole subject. He blames the secrecy, the silence around sex, saying it leads to misunderstanding, even complexes, especially for people with naturally strong drives.
Instead of seeing it as a potential blessing.
Right. He argues those strong drives are a blessing, so a source of great power, if they're understood and used intelligently through transmutation.
And he warns against intemperance, too, saying excess in sex habits is as bad as, say, drinking too much.
Exactly. He claims it can harm health, reason, even lead to insanity or hypochondria. He makes a rather pointed comment about humans being the only creatures who violate nature's purpose here, living in a state of open season regarding sex without natural controls. The bottom line, he says, is that this ignorance carries stupendous penalties while denying people equally stupendous benefits.
So really, when you pull it all together, this chapter isn't just some quick tip for getting rich. It's a really complex look at human energy, creativity, relationships, self-control, all through this specific, maybe controversial lens of sex transmutation.
Mm.
So after diving into all that from Napoleon Hill's chapter, what could it mean for you listening?
Well, the source is suggesting that this incredibly powerful energy inside us, maybe often misunderstood or ignored, could hold a key to unlocking creativity, achieving more, reaching higher, if we learn to understand it, transmute it, guide it, and ideally blend it with love and romance.
Yeah, it really challenges you to think differently about desire, emotion, even your relationships, not just as personal stuff, but as potentially fundamental forces that Hill claims can shape your ability to be creative, to access deeper insights, and, well, to achieve what you're aiming for. It definitely leaves us with a lot to chew on from Hill's perspective. How might, just thinking about this idea, the transmutation of powerful energy, how might that impact the way you approach your own creative work or your ambitions, or even just how you understand your own motivations? Something to consider.